The delegation asked for you by name, Oliver said, like the sentence had personally offended him. The conference room smelled like burnt espresso and new carpet glue. On the screen behind him, the Tokyo team sat in perfect silence, 6 faces in dark suits, waiting. Dylan Cross adjusted his watch and smiled at me without warmth. Well, he said, they'll have to get used to our new structure. I looked at the screen, then at Dylan, then at the renewal binder he had not opened. Good luck with that, I said. Because I already knew the contract wasn't going to be the problem. They were. If you enjoy stories about quiet confidence being mistaken for weakness, you'll probably like this one. Like and subscribe if you want more of them. I promise I keep the corporate jargon to a survivable level. My name is Mara Ellison. I was 46 years old when Meridian Industrial Group decided I was redundant. Not underperforming. Not expensive. Redundant. There's always a softer word when someone wants the benefit of a bad decision without the taste of it. Meridian was a mid-sized manufacturing company based outside Cleveland, Ohio. We made precision hydraulic assemblies for heavy industrial equipment. Excavators. Mining trucks. Port cranes. Machines large enough to make normal office furniture feel like dollhouse props. By the time I was laid off, I had spent 11 years as Director of Global Partnerships. That title sounds elegant. In practice, it meant I lived between time zones, contracts, custom schedules, engineering revisions, translation problems, supplier audits, and the delicate emotional weather patterns of people who could move $22 million a year by simply deciding they no longer trusted you. The biggest of those relationships was Shinwa Precision Works in Nagoya, Japan. Shinwa manufactured a proprietary servo valve assembly that Meridian needed for our highest margin hydraulic control units. Those control units went into 3 product lines that generated roughly $61 million in annual revenue. Without Shinwa, we could still build something. Technically. The same way you can technically make coffee by chewing beans and drinking hot water. Not recommended. When I joined Meridian, Shinwa was a minor supplier with a tense relationship and an expiring 3-year contract. The previous partnership manager had treated them like a vendor. That was the first mistake. Shinwa did not operate like a vendor. They operated like a long-term institutional partner with a memory. Every missed call mattered. Every rushed meeting mattered. Every attempt to push for efficiency without understanding the hierarchy landed like a small insult. They did not argue loudly. They simply remembered. Americans often misunderstand quietness in international business. They mistake it for agreement. That is expensive. My first Shinwa renewal was in 2014. Meridian's leadership wanted me to get aggressive on pricing. Our COO at the time handed me a target sheet and said, push them down 8%. They need us. They did not need us. That was obvious after reading their export mix, customer concentration, tooling capacity, and the fact that they were already supplying 2 German manufacturers that paid faster than we did. I told leadership that. They blinked at me with the soft irritation executives reserve for inconvenient facts. So I did what experienced women in corporate roles learn to do. I documented the risk, got on a plane, and solved the problem anyway. That first trip to Nagoya changed the entire relationship. I learned that Shinwa's president, Kenji Sato, cared less about unit price than predictability. Their production planning system was built around disciplined forecasts. Meridian had been treating forecast updates like casual suggestions, which is a charming habit if you enjoy making serious manufacturers quietly hate you. I rebuilt the account structure around what I called the Shinwa Continuity Protocol. It had 4 parts. Quarterly rolling forecasts locked 120 days out. Engineering change notices delivered in bilingual format within 48 hours. Payment variance reports reviewed before month-end. Executive communication routed through a single relationship owner. Me. Not because I enjoyed being indispensable, although I'll admit it has its conveniences. Because Shinwa had made it clear, politely and repeatedly, that fragmented communication created risk. I also started learning Japanese. Not fluently. Let's not get romantic. I was a 35-year-old woman with a mortgage, a demanding job, and a brain already storing too many part numbers. I was not becoming a poet in Kyoto. but I learned enough. Conversational Japanese. Business greetings. Meeting etiquette. How to apologize properly. How to understand when we will consider it meant yes, no, or you have embarrassed yourself and we are giving you time to notice. I hired a tutor twice a week for the first year. Then once a week for 5 years after that. I studied on flights. I studied at hotel desks at 2 a.m. with vending machine coffee and a headache from recycled airplane air. People at Meridian thought it was cute. That was the word they used. Cute. Look at Mara, one sales VP said during a holiday lunch. Learning Japanese for her supplier friends. Supplier friends. I smiled and kept eating my salad. By 2018, Shinwa had renewed twice. The contract had grown from $9.4 million annually to $18.7 million. Our defect rates dropped 37%. Emergency shipment fees decreased by $640,000 in one fiscal year because Shinwa started giving us early capacity warnings instead of letting us discover problems at the loading dock. That was not luck. That was trust converted into operational stability. By 2021, I had negotiated the master supply agreement that became the backbone of the relationship. It was 74 pages long. Most people remembered the pricing table. I remembered Section 14.3. Section 14.3 required that any annual renewal negotiation involving production forecast commitments, technical revision schedules, or volume allocation rights must include a designated bilingual partnership authority mutually recognized by both parties. The language was mine. Legal approved it because it sounded reasonable. Operations ignored it because contract governance makes their eyes glaze over. Executive leadership signed it because the pricing looked good. Shinwa understood exactly what it meant. So did I. The designated bilingual partnership authority was listed in Exhibit D. Mara Ellison. Not Meridian generally. Not global partnerships. Not whatever ambitious person might someday inherit my office and my parking spot. Me. There was a reason for that. 3 years earlier, Meridian had nearly damaged the Shinwa relationship beyond repair because our engineering team sent revised tolerance requirements directly to Shinwa's plant team without the proper approval chain. The email was casual, vague, and included the phrase "quick tweak." There are phrases that should never be translated into a manufacturing context. Quick tweak is one of them. Shinwa interpreted it as an informal demand to alter tooling without documented liability boundaries. Their plant director escalated it internally. Their legal team paused shipments for 9 days. Meridian lost $1.2 million in delayed production and air freight. I fixed it by flying to Nagoya, sitting through 2 very cold meetings, apologizing in Japanese with the correct level of formality, and presenting a revised engineering change protocol with traceable authority. Mr. Sato told me afterward, in English, "You understand consequence." That was the relationship. Not friendship. Not charm. Consequence. Over 11 years, I handled 43 executive visits, 19 supplier audits, 7 contract amendments for emergency capacity reallocations, and 1 typhoon-related logistics crisis that required rerouting components through Osaka while our plant manager in Ohio kept asking if Japan had another airport. It does. Several, in fact. I missed my nephew's high school graduation because Shinwa's quality director found a metallurgical variance in a batch scheduled for our largest customer. I spent Thanksgiving evening in 2019 on a video call with their engineering team while my sister texted me photos of pie like evidence in a family trial. I carried Meridian quietly. Not alone. Nobody carries a company alone. But I carried the part nobody else wanted to understand. The invisible work. The relationship maintenance. The cultural translation. The contract memory. The little notes that never made it into dashboards. Mr. Sato's preference for receiving difficult news before formal meetings. Shinwa's CFO's dislike of surprise pricing requests. Their production director's habit of pausing before saying no. The fact that their legal counsel read English perfectly but preferred not to speak it in live calls because precision mattered. That kind of knowledge does not fit neatly into a CRM field. So naturally, leadership eventually decided it was overhead. Before Dylan arrived, Meridian had a functional culture. Not perfect. No company with beige walls and quarterly margin targets is perfect, but functional. Our CEO, Grant Whitcomb, was a numbers man with the emotional range of a locked filing cabinet, but he respected competence. Our COO, Helena Price, understood manufacturing well enough to know that suppliers were not vending machines with logos. Oliver Nash, our VP of Sales, was loud but useful. He had the gift of saying exactly the wrong thing in the first draft and then letting smarter people edit him before disaster. And Priya Menon, our senior contracts manager, was the reason half the company had not accidentally signed away indemnity rights by clicking approve too quickly. Priya had a dry voice, perfect posture, and the ability to find a missing clause in 200 pages while eating yogurt. I trusted her completely. So did Shinwa. They knew her name. That mattered. The department worked because everyone knew the boundaries. Sales did not promise volume without checking with operations. Operations did not revise schedules without looping in partnerships. Engineering did not contact Shinwa directly unless I opened the channel. Legal did not treat translation as decoration. Then Meridian acquired a smaller regional parts distributor in Indianapolis. That acquisition gave the board a reason to use the phrase regional consolidation every 11 minutes. Regional consolidation is a lovely term. It means nobody has to say layoffs until the calendar invitations go out. That was when Dylan Cross arrived. Dylan was 33, though he dressed like a man trying to look 41 in a private equity brochure. Slim navy suits. Brown loafers polished to a mirror shine. No tie, because apparently neckwear had become a symbol of strategic stagnation. His hair was aggressively neat. His smile arrived before his sincerity and left before it could be verified. He was the nephew of Meridian's board chair, which everyone knew and nobody mentioned directly. That is how corporate families work. Blood enters the room wearing a title, and everyone pretends it passed through normal hiring channels. Dylan had spent 4 years at a consulting firm where he specialized in go-to-market transformation for industrial platforms. I asked him once what that meant. He said, "I help legacy organizations unlock cross-border revenue velocity." I nodded. Because I was in my 40s by then and had learned not to waste good oxygen on decorative language. Grant brought Dylan in as Senior Vice President of Commercial Integration after the acquisition. Within 2 weeks, Dylan had renamed 3 departments and scheduled a global synergy listening tour without inviting anyone outside North America. A bold choice for global work. His first mistake with Shinwa happened in a leadership meeting in May. We were reviewing renewal timelines. The Shinwa Master Agreement expired December 31st, with the annual renewal meeting scheduled for October. I walked the team through the negotiation map. Volume commitments. Currency adjustment band. Forecast variance tolerances. Technical roadmap. Relationship sequence. Dylan leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against his notebook. "So why are we treating this like a diplomatic summit?" he asked. The room went still. I looked up from my binder. "Because it is one." He smiled. Not warmly. "Mara, with respect, it's a supplier renewal." There it was. With respect. The phrase people use right before proving they have none. I said, "It's a $22 million annual agreement tied to $61 million in downstream revenue." "Right," he said. "Which is why we need commercial discipline, not relationship theater." Oliver stopped writing. Priya looked at me once, then down at the contract. Dylan continued, enjoying the sound of himself. "I appreciate the history." "I do. But we can't keep building around single points of failure." That was technically true. Unfortunately, he did not understand what the single point of failure was. He thought it was me. It was trust. I said, "The agreement requires a mutually recognized bilingual partnership authority at renewal." Dylan waved his pen. "We can assign that." "No," I said. "Both parties recognize it." He smiled again. "Then we'll socialize the transition." Socialize. An interesting verb for lighting a fuse. After the meeting, Priya followed me into the hallway. "He hasn't read the agreement," she said. "No. He's going to try to move you off Shinwa." "Yes." She adjusted the folder against her chest. "Are you worried?" I looked back through the glass wall at Dylan, who was now explaining something to Oliver with both hands. "No," I said. I'm curious how long it takes him to discover paper has memory. Priya almost smiled. Almost. That was high emotion for contracts. Dylan's second mistake was trying to charm Shinwa directly. He asked me for Mr. Sato's email address. I gave it to him. That may sound careless. It was not. Dylan was an executive of Meridian. He had the right to contact a partner. I was not there to obstruct communication. I was there to make sure the consequences had proper documentation. His email went out on a Wednesday afternoon. He copied me, Oliver, Grant, Helena, and, because the universe has a sense of humor, Priya. Subject line, excited to reset the Shinwa relationship. Reset. I stared at that word for several seconds. Then I read the body. Dylan introduced himself as the new commercial integration lead and said he was looking forward to refreshing the partnership model. He suggested a more agile renewal process and proposed consolidating the October meeting into a 2-hour virtual session focused on price, volume, and innovation priorities. 2 hours. For a $22 million agreement built over 11 years. He closed with, "We're eager to modernize the cadence and remove unnecessary ceremony." Ceremony. That was my favorite part. I did not respond. Mr. Sato did. 26 hours later. His reply was polite enough to freeze water. "Dear Mr. Cross, thank you for your message. We acknowledge your role. For matters concerning renewal, we will continue established communication through Ms. Ellison under the current agreement. Regards, Kenji Sato." That was all. 4 sentences. Corporate haiku with a blade inside. Dylan came to my office 10 minutes after receiving it. He did not knock. People like Dylan knock when clients are watching. He held his phone in one hand. "What's this about?" I looked up. "Which part?" He turned the screen toward me, as though I had never seen email before. "This. Established communication through Ms. Ellison." That would be me. His jaw tightened. "I understand that, Mara." "Good. We're aligned." He took a breath through his nose. Why is he pushing back? He isn't. He clearly is. "No," I said. "He's following the contract." Dylan gave a small laugh. "The contract doesn't get to decide our org chart." "No, but it does decide renewal procedure." He stared at me for a moment. I watched him realize, not fully, but enough to dislike the shape of it. "Send me the relevant clause," he said. "I already did. Last week. Page 51. He looked away. There are many kinds of silence in offices. That one was called "I did not read the attachment." He left without saying thank you. Of course he did. Over the summer, Dylan began building his case. Not directly. Protected people rarely move directly when bureaucracy can do the work for them. He started using phrases in meetings. Knowledge concentration. Commercial bottlenecks. Legacy relationship dependency. Then came my personal favorite. Cultural gatekeeping. That one appeared in a slide deck. A real slide deck. With a blue gradient background. Apparently, after 11 years of learning the language, contract history, and negotiation preferences of our largest overseas partner, I had become a gate. Interesting. I asked Priya if that made her a fence. She said, "Only if I can bill hourly." The consolidation review began in August. Human Resources called it a role alignment assessment. Dylan called it commercial simplification. I called it exactly what it was. A cleanup before budget season. My meeting landed on a Friday morning at 8:30. That timing was intentional. Bad news before lunch. Less time for conversation. Very efficient, if you do not care about human beings as a category. The room was Conference Room C, the one near the executive wing with the frosted glass wall and the air vent that clicked every 42 seconds. The table had been recently wiped with lemon cleaner. Too much lemon cleaner. Grant sat at the head. Dylan sat to his right. Marcy Bell from HR sat to his left with a folder already open. Priya was not there. That told me everything. Dylan began. "Mara, first, we want to acknowledge your contributions. Always contributions. Never work. Work has weight. Contributions sound like something you drop in a jar near a cash register." Grant looked uncomfortable. Not enough to stop anything. Just enough to want credit for feeling bad. Dylan continued. "As part of the regional consolidation, We're centralizing global supplier management under commercial integration. I said nothing. He glanced at Marcy. Your position is being eliminated effective today. There it was. 11 years folded into one sentence and placed gently on the table like a napkin. Marcy slid the severance packet toward me. 12 weeks. Outplacement support. Continuation of benefits through the end of the month. Very generous if your imagination stops at payroll. Dylan leaned forward. We want this transition to be respectful. You'll provide a complete handoff to Oliver and my office. We'll need Shinwa contact history, renewal templates, translation notes, and any informal context that isn't in the system. I looked at him. That was the moment. Not the layoff. The assumption. He thought they could remove me and still extract me afterward. A classic management fantasy. Fire the person. Keep the spine. I opened the folder, scanned the first page, and closed it. No. Marcy blinked. I'm sorry. No transition period. Dylan's expression tightened. Mara, that's not really practical. Neither was this. Grant finally spoke. Mara, we do need continuity. I looked at him then. Really looked. He had the expression of a man who knew exactly enough to be concerned and not enough to be brave. The contract explains continuity, I said. Dylan gave a short laugh. There's no need to be dramatic. I stood. The chair legs made a soft scrape against the carpet. Not loud. Enough. I picked up my bag and left the severance packet on the table. At the door, Dylan said, "We'll be fine." I turned back. He was smiling again. That small prepared smile. Then I won't worry, I said. And I walked out. The floor sounded different when I crossed it for the last time. Keyboards. Printer trays. Someone laughing near the coffee machine. The normal hum of a company that did not yet know it had cut through a load-bearing wall. Priya met me near the elevators. She knew. Of course she knew. Contracts people always know before formal announcements because paperwork leaves tracks. They did it, she said quietly. Yes. Did they ask for a transition? Yes. What did you say? No. She nodded once. Approvingly. For Priya, that was confetti. Then she said, Dylan asked me yesterday if Exhibit D was binding or relationship binding. I stared at her. Those were his words? Unfortunately. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside. Priya put one hand lightly on the door before it closed. Mara. I looked at her. I saved the clause history. I almost smiled. Good. The doors closed. That was the end of my employment at Meridian Industrial Group. It was not the end of the relationship. That afternoon, I drove home in clear September sunlight with a cardboard box on the passenger seat and my company phone powered off in my purse. I stopped at the grocery store because I needed eggs, coffee, and normal life. There is something deeply clarifying about buying avocados 90 minutes after being declared redundant. The produce section does not care about org charts. At home, I put the eggs away, changed into jeans, and opened my personal laptop at the kitchen table. I did not download Meridian files. I did not access proprietary systems. I did not sabotage anything. People imagine revenge as dramatic because they've watched too many movies and not enough board meetings. Real consequences usually begin with forms. First, I emailed Priya from my personal account. One sentence. Please preserve all correspondence related to Section 14.3, Exhibit D, and renewal authority under the Shinwa Master Supply Agreement. She replied 11 minutes later. Already done. Then I contacted my attorney, Elena Ruiz, who had reviewed my employment agreement years earlier when Meridian tried to add a restrictive covenant after promotion season. Elena had the calm voice of someone who had disappointed many executives professionally. I forwarded her my severance packet, the original Shinwa agreement, and the renewal authority exhibit. She called me 22 minutes later. Well, she said, they were ambitious. That's one word. The agreement names you specifically. Yes. And renewal procedure requires mutual recognition. Yes. Did they remove you before amendment? Yes. She paused. Did Shinwa agree to recognize anyone else? No. Another pause. Then, dryly, that may become inconvenient. I looked out my kitchen window. My neighbor's dog was barking at a garbage truck with the confidence of a small creature who believed persistence could alter municipal services. What do I need to do? I asked. Nothing improper, Elena said. Send formal notice that you are no longer employed by Meridian and are therefore no longer authorized to act as their designated partnership authority. That activates the clause? It doesn't activate it. Reality activates it. The notice documents reality. Beautiful. I liked that. Reality activates it. At 4:17 p.m., Elena sent formal notices to Meridian's legal department and Shinwa's general counsel. The language was plain. Ms. Mara Ellison is no longer employed by Meridian Industrial Group as of today's date. She is not authorized to act on behalf of Meridian in any capacity. For avoidance of doubt, her designation under Exhibit D of the Shinwa Master Supply Agreement is no longer operative unless and until both parties mutually recognize a successor authority under Section 14.3. For avoidance of doubt. Legal poetry. Then I made dinner. Salmon. Rice. Asparagus I almost overcooked because my sister called halfway through and wanted to know whether I was processing. I told her I was broiling fish. She said, that is not what I meant. I know. That night, I watched an old mystery show and slept 8 hours. Not because I was unbothered. Because once a mechanism is properly set in motion, hovering does not make it more effective. They thought I would panic. What they did not know is that I had spent 11 years making sure the relationship would survive anything except disrespect. By Monday morning, Meridian had announced the consolidation. The email went company-wide at 9:06 a.m. I know because 4 people forwarded it to my personal address within 20 minutes. Mara Ellison has departed Meridian as part of our regional commercial integration. Departed. Like I had wandered into the woods. The email said Shinwa Relationship Management would transition to Oliver Nash under Dylan Cross's executive oversight. Oliver called me at 9:42. I let it go to voicemail. Mara, hey. I know this is awkward. Listen, I'm being handed Shinwa and I could use maybe 15 minutes. Just high-level context. Nothing formal. I don't want to step on anything. Call me back. Oliver was not a bad man. He was a sales executive who understood enough to be frightened. That made him smarter than Dylan. I did not call back. At 10:31, Dylan emailed my personal address. Subject, Transition Materials. Mara, given your departure was part of a planned consolidation, we need your cooperation in transferring informal Shinwa relationship knowledge. Please send any personal notes, translation aids, meeting histories, and renewal strategy documents not stored in Meridian systems. Best? Dylan. Best. Always nice when someone signs a demand like a birthday card. I forwarded it to Elena. She replied, do not respond. So I did not. By Tuesday, the first stage began. Technical. Shinwa's partner portal rejected Oliver's access request. Not because anyone blocked him maliciously. Because the portal required dual authentication tied to an approved relationship authority. Meridian's operations team had access for shipment data. Finance had access for invoices. Engineering had read-only technical document access. Renewal workspace access was different. It housed forecast commitments, pricing models, technical roadmaps, and bilingual negotiation records. It required Shinwa side approval and Meridian side authority match. The approval field still showed my name. Oliver submitted his request 3 times. 3 denials. The automated message was apparently very polite. Renewal workspace authorization cannot be modified without confirmation from currently recognized partnership authority and Shinwa executive administrator. Currently recognized partnership authority. That would have been me. Except I was no longer authorized to act for Meridian. A small circle. Perfectly documented. Oliver left another voicemail. Mara, I'm getting blocked by the Shinwa portal. I know you probably can't help, but if there's a standard escalation path, maybe you could just point me toward. He stopped himself. I could hear him realize mid-sentence that asking me for the standard escalation path was the entire problem. Never mind, he said quietly. Hope you're doing okay. Then he hung up. Wednesday brought the relational failure. Dylan scheduled a video introduction with Shinwa's commercial team. He did not include an interpreter. I know this because Priya texted me at 7:18 a.m. He is opening in English at full speed. A second text followed. He just said we are excited to reset expectations. Then, Mr. Sato has not blinked in 4 minutes. I made coffee. Good coffee. Not office coffee that had been sitting on a burner long enough to qualify as industrial coding. At 8:03, Priya called. I answered because Priya did not call unless language had failed completely. How bad? I asked. She exhaled. He opened with, "We're moving past legacy dependencies." Of course he did. Then he said he wanted to simplify the relationship into clean commercial terms. I closed my eyes briefly. That phrase, translated culturally, meant we no longer value the structure you trusted. What did Sato say? He thanked him for the update. Oh, yes. There are polite phrases that end conversations more efficiently than insults. Thank you for the update is one of them. Priya continued. Then Shinwa's legal counsel asked whether Meridian had completed the mutually recognized authority transfer under Section 14.3. And Dylan? He said legal details shouldn't slow strategic alignment. I set down my mug. Slowly. That's a real sentence? Unfortunately. I could hear paper moving on her end. Then Mr. Sato asked whether you were available to join the renewal preparation meeting. And? Dylan said your role had been consolidated. We were both quiet for a moment. There are moments when incompetence stops being amusing and becomes expensive. What did Sato do? I asked. He ended the call. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just ended it. By Thursday, the financial failure arrived. Meridian's plant scheduling team received notice that Shinwa would not commit Q1 capacity allocation until renewal authority was resolved. That did not stop current shipments. Shinwa was too disciplined for that. But it froze forward allocation. No Q1 allocation meant Meridian could not confirm delivery dates to its 2 largest OEM customers for hydraulic control units. Without delivery dates, sales could not close pending annual purchase orders. $14.6 million in Q1 revenue became provisional within 24 hours. That word, provisional, has a particular sound in executive meetings. Like glass cracking in another room. Oliver called again Thursday evening. This voicemail was shorter. Mara, I know you're not responding. I get it. But I want you to know some of us knew this was a mistake. Pause. Actually, that's not helpful. Sorry. He hung up. Friday brought the regulatory adjacent failure. Not government regulation. Import compliance. Shinwa's servo valve assemblies used a restricted coating that required annual export classification affirmation and end-use certification updates. Routine paperwork. Unless the one person who knew the timing was gone. The update request had been sitting in the Shinwa renewal workspace. The one Oliver could not access. Meridian's compliance team missed the confirmation window. At 2:16 p.m. Friday, Shinwa's logistics department placed all November shipments under administrative hold until end-use certificates were reconfirmed through approved channels. Approved channels. Again, not vengeance. Procedure. The difference matters. A hold on November shipments meant Meridian's Ohio plant had 18 days of inventory on hand. 18. Manufacturing people do not like numbers that small unless they refer to coffee breaks. By the end of the second week, people had stopped calling it a transition. Now they were calling it the Shinwa issue. Corporate language always evolves through denial stages. First transition, then issue, then exposure, then emergency. The fourth stage usually arrives when finance gets invited to meetings before breakfast. Priya kept me updated with the restraint of someone who knew she should not enjoy being right. Her texts were concise. Plant schedule frozen through January 12th. Oliver looks ill. Dylan told Grant this is relationship turbulence. Helena asked for the contract binder. That last one mattered. Helena Price did not ask for binders unless she already suspected the answer. The third week began with a public mistake. Dylan held a renewal readiness meeting with Meridian's executive team, Shinwa's commercial director, Shinwa's legal counsel, and 3 people from our largest OEM customer, Baxter Klein Equipment. who had joined because their Q1 delivery schedule was now at risk. Baxter Klein represented $38 million a year in finished product sales for Meridian. They were not a client you invited into uncertainty unless the building was already smoking. Dylan had prepared a presentation. Of course he had. Men like Dylan trust slides because slides never interrupt. The deck was titled Shinwa Partnership Modernization Path. Priya sent me a photo of the title slide with one message: "Pray for us." I did not pray. I cleaned my kitchen. According to Priya, the presentation lasted 17 minutes before it became unrecoverable. Dylan opened by saying Meridian was repositioning supplier engagement away from personality dependency and towards scalable commercial architecture. Shinwa's commercial director listened through the interpreter without expression. Baxter Klein's procurement VP asked a simple question: "Do you have confirmed Q1 capacity allocation from Shinwa or not?" Dylan said, "We're actively aligning toward that outcome." The procurement VP said, "That means no." Dylan tried to pivot. Then Shinwa's legal counsel asked, in English, who at Meridian is currently mutually recognized under Section 14.3? That was the question. The room went quiet. Dylan said, "We don't see that clause as operationally restrictive." Priya told me later that Helena closed her eyes. Not for long. Just long enough to visit another universe where competent decisions had been made. Shinwa's counsel repeated the question. "Who is mutually recognized?" Dylan said, "Oliver Nash has executive authority to manage commercial accounts." Shinwa's counsel said, "That was not my question. There are moments when the floor does not collapse all at once. It lowers slightly under your feet. Everyone feels it." Dylan then made the mistake that exposed him completely. He said, with respect, "We can't allow a former employee to hold the renewal hostage." Former employee. Hostage. In front of Shinwa. In front of Baxter Klein. In front of Meridian's executive team. Priya said Mr. Sato, who had joined silently by then, leaned forward for the first time. He spoke in English. Ms. Ellison did not hold anything hostage. She held it together. Nobody spoke after that. Not immediately. Then Baxter Klein's procurement VP said, "We're pausing our Q1 purchase order release until Meridian confirms supply continuity." That sentence cost $12.8 million in pending orders before lunch. Dylan's face apparently went pale in patches. A strange detail, but Priya notices everything. By 3 p.m., Grant got involved directly. By 4:30, the board chair requested a special briefing. By 5:10, Dylan called me from his cell. I let it ring. Voicemail. "Mara, it's Dylan. We need to talk. There's been some confusion around the Shinwa process, and I think it would be mutually beneficial to clarify a few things." Mutually beneficial. He was still using brochure language while standing in a burning room. An hour later, Grant called. I let that go too. Then Oliver. Then Marcy from HR. Then Dylan again. By 8 p.m., I had 14 missed calls and 9 voicemails. I listened to none of them until morning. Boundaries are easier after dinner. The next day, Elena forwarded a letter from Meridian's legal department asking whether I would be willing to assist with temporary clarification of the Shinwa Renewal Authority structure. Temporary clarification. Meaning, please put the roof back on without mentioning who removed the beams. Elena's note was short. They want free help without admitting liability. Hard pass unless you want to engage. I did not. Not yet. They thought silence meant I was hesitating. What they did not know was that Shinwa had already reached out. Mr. Sato emailed my personal account on the first Monday after my departure. "Dear Ms. Ellison, we have been informed you are no longer with Meridian. We are sorry to hear this. Your work has been essential to the stability of the relationship. If you are open to speaking in a personal capacity, I would be grateful. Regards, Kenji Sato." I waited before replying. Not because I was playing games. Because boundaries matter. I responded through Elena, confirming I could speak personally, not as a Meridian representative, and not regarding confidential Meridian information. Mr. Sato accepted those terms immediately. Our first call lasted 26 minutes. We did not discuss Meridian strategy. We did not discuss pricing. We did not discuss confidential forecasts. We discussed trust. He asked one question near the end. Do you intend to remain in this industry? Yes, I said. Good. That was all. The second call came 9 days later. This time Shinwa's HR director joined. That is when I understood the shape of the next door opening. They were creating a North American partnership role. Vice President, Strategic Partnerships, Americas. Based remotely, with quarterly travel to Japan and direct reporting to Mr. Sato. Compensation, $410,000 base, performance bonus up to 40%, relocation not required, and equity participation through Shinwa's international subsidiary. My previous salary at Meridian was $168,000. I made them repeat the number. Not because I was shocked. Because clean audio matters. By the time Dylan began calling, Shinwa and I were already discussing terms. I did not tell Meridian. I owed them no narrative assistance. The panic escalated again in week 4. Stage 5. Nobody could find the bilingual negotiation histories. Not the official contracts. Those existed. Priya would never allow otherwise. The missing material was the decision context, side letters, meeting summaries, translation notes, concession histories, risk explanations, and the annotated renewal maps I had built across 11 years. Some were in Meridian systems. Some were in Shinwa's portal. Some were reflected in email chains. None existed in a single folder labeled, "In case you fire the only person who understands this." A design oversight, apparently. Oliver tried to reconstruct the history from CRM notes. CRM notes are where nuance goes to be flattened. One entry from 2019 read, Shinwa hesitant on volume flex. What it meant was, Shinwa would accept volume flexibility if Meridian locked a minimum 120-day forecast, agreed to absorb expedited freight above a variance threshold, and stopped sending engineering revisions after 5 p.m. Japan time on Fridays. Tiny distinction. Only worth about $3 million in operational stability. Dylan hired an outside international negotiation consultant. That lasted 6 days. The consultant requested the bilingual meeting archive. Meridian could not provide it. He requested current Shinwa relationship maps. Meridian sent an org chart. He requested the mutually recognized authority transfer documentation. Meridian sent Oliver's title announcement. The consultant resigned from the engagement on day 7. His final note, according to Priya, said, "The primary barrier is not negotiation strategy. It is credibility." I liked him immediately. Never met him. Still, Stage 6 arrived with the auditors. Not financial auditors. Customer supply chain auditors from Baxter Klein. They showed up at Meridian's Ohio plant on a Thursday morning because their own risk controls required direct review after a Tier 1 supplier failed to confirm component continuity. The auditors were in the lobby at 8:12 a.m. No warning beyond the contractual notice Meridian had ignored because it went to Dylan's integration inbox. The plant manager called Helena. Helena called Grant. Grant called Dylan. Dylan called Oliver. Oliver texted Priya. Priya texted me. Auditors in the lobby. For words. Very efficient. Baxter Klein's audit team requested proof of confirmed Shinwa allocation, current end-use certifications, renewal procedure compliance, and supplier continuity ownership. Meridian had partial answers to all 4. Partial answers are what companies use right before clients begin calculating penalties. The audit finding landed 48 hours later. Baxter Klein classified Meridian's Shinwa dependency as an uncontrolled continuity exposure. That triggered a contractual right to dual-source future control unit orders. Translation: Baxter Klein could start moving business elsewhere. Not immediately. Worse. Methodically. That same afternoon, Meridian's stock dropped 18% after an analyst note mentioned supply continuity concerns tied to a major Japanese manufacturing partner. Nobody named Shinwa. They did not have to. The market is not stupid. Just impatient. Dylan left me another voicemail at 6:43 p.m. His voice had changed. Less polished. More air between words. Mara, I'm asking you to call me back. Please. This is getting bigger than anyone expected. We need your help. I know there were communication issues around the transition, but we can make that right. Communication issues. That was one way to describe using the word hostage in front of the partner who trusted me. The next voicemail came from Grant. Mara, this is Grant. I would like to speak with you directly. We are prepared to discuss a consulting arrangement. Significant compensation. Whatever is appropriate. Whatever is appropriate. A phrase executives discover after the cheaper options fail. I called Elena. Now? She asked. Now. She did not ask what I meant. Good attorneys listen between words. We prepared a response. Not emotional. Not punitive. Specific. Meridian could request my assistance only through counsel. Any engagement would require independent contractor terms, no access to my personal notes unless legally transferable, no representation that I caused or contributed to the renewal disruption, and full disclosure to Shinwa that I no longer represented Meridian. Elena sent it at 8:02 a.m. Meridian responded in 19 minutes. Fastest legal review in company history, I assume. They wanted a call that afternoon. I agreed. Elena joined. Grant joined. Helena joined. Dylan joined. Marcy from HR joined, though I cannot imagine why. Maybe to witness the cost of phrases like regional consolidation. The video call opened with everyone trying not to look desperate. This is harder than it sounds. Grant spoke first. Mara, thank you for making time. I'm available for 30 minutes. Dylan looked down. Helena looked directly at the camera. That was why I had always respected her. She did not enjoy pretending. Grant continued. We need support stabilizing the Shinwa renewal. What specifically are you asking me to do? He glanced at Dylan. Dylan did not speak. Interesting. Grant said, we need you to help restore the communication channel and guide Oliver through the renewal process. Shinwa has not recognized Oliver. That's part of what we need help resolving. No, I said. That is the thing you needed to resolve before eliminating my role. Silence. Marcy looked like she wanted to become a chair. Helena finally spoke. Mara, you're right. There it was. A small sentence. Heavy. Grant nodded once, because now that someone else had spent the courage, he could afford agreement. Yes, he said. Mistakes were made. I looked at him. By whom? He hesitated. There is always hesitation when accountability is asked to enter the room by name. Dylan leaned forward suddenly. With respect, relitigating the transition isn't productive right now. With respect. Still. I almost admired the consistency. Elena said, my client asked a clear question. Dylan's face tightened. Grant answered. By leadership. By me. By Dylan. The transition was mishandled. Mishandled. Not perfect. But progress. I said, Shinwa's trust cannot be restored through a consulting patch. Dylan snapped then. Not yelling. Worse. Thin control cracking. Mara, we are looking at a $22 million contract exposure and a major customer audit because of a clause you wrote around yourself. There it was. The accusation underneath the request. I folded my hands. The clause was approved by Meridian Legal, signed by Meridian executives, and accepted by Shinwa because Meridian had already damaged the relationship once through unauthorized technical communication. He opened his mouth. I continued. It did not create the dependency. It documented the trust required to manage it. Dylan looked away. Grant said, what would it take? That was the real question. Finally, I let the silence sit for a moment. Not theatrically. Precisely. I will not return to my former position, I said. Dylan looked up quickly. I will not serve under commercial integration. I will not report to Dylan. I will not be used as temporary credibility while the same people continue making the same decisions. Grant swallowed. Helena's expression did not change, but she was listening carefully. I continued. If Meridian wants my help, the terms are simple. Elena had the document ready. She shared it after I nodded. First, I said, I return only as Executive Vice President of Global Partnerships and Supplier Continuity, reporting directly to the CEO with board visibility on Shinwa matters. Marcy started writing. Second, compensation reflects the actual risk being managed. $510,000 base salary, $150,000 signing bonus, annual performance bonus up to 50%, and 0.75% equity vesting over 3 years. Dylan made a sound. Small. Involuntary. I ignored it. Third, full authority over Shinwa communication, renewal procedure, supplier continuity policy, and international partner governance. No consultant interference. No executive overrides without written board approval. Helena nodded once. Fourth, Priya Menon is promoted to Vice President of Contract Governance with a 30% salary increase. Oliver remains involved in commercial forecasting, but has no unilateral Shinwa authority until recognized by Shinwa. Anyone who is reassigned or penalized for raising concerns about the transition receives written correction of record. Priya had not been fired, but her performance file had received a collaboration concern after she objected to Dylan's renewal approach. I knew because Priya told me. Contracts people preserve receipts. Fifth, I said, Meridian issues a formal internal report documenting what failed, why the transition violated established partner governance, and who is responsible for removing the recognized authority without successor approval. Dylan looked directly at the camera then. No. There it was. The condition that mattered. Money was tolerable. Title was negotiable. Authority was painful. But written accountability? That touched the machinery. Grant said quietly, Dylan. No, Dylan said again. We are not creating an internal blame document during an active commercial crisis. Elena said, then there is no engagement. Dylan leaned closer. You're really going to let this collapse over wording? I looked at him. That was the moment I had been waiting for without admitting it to myself. Not revenge. Clarity. No, I said. You let it collapse over wording when you called 11 years of trust a legacy dependency. Nobody spoke. I continued. I am offering to help repair what can be repaired. I am not helping you hide why it broke. Dylan's jaw moved once. Grant put a hand over his face briefly. Helena said, the report is necessary. Dylan turned toward her. You can't be serious. I am, she said. Because if we don't document this, we'll do it again. That was the first useful sentence Meridian had produced in weeks. The call ended without agreement. They asked for 24 hours. I gave them 12. Not because I was cruel. Because Shinwa's renewal window was closing, Baxter Klein's audit response was due, and reality does not extend deadlines because executives need time to become honest. That evening, I made soup. Chicken, vegetables, too much black pepper. I ate at the kitchen table while rain tapped against the window and my personal phone lit up twice with calls from Grant. I did not answer during dinner. Some standards are worth having. At 9:14 p.m., Elena called. They agreed. All terms. All. The report. Yes. Board-directed, internal distribution with named decision accountability. I looked at the rain on the glass. Send it. The final agreement arrived at 11:03 p.m. I read every page. So did Elena. So did Priya unofficially, because there are some documents one wants reviewed by a person who can hear a comma breathing. At 12:21 a.m. I signed. At 12:24 a.m., Grant signed. At 12:31 a.m., the board chair signed. Dylan did not sign anything. Appropriate. He had already contributed enough. My first call the next morning was not to Meridian. It was to Mr. Sato. I called at 7 a.m. Ohio time, 8 p.m. in Nagoya. He answered from what looked like his office. Behind him, shelves. Low light. A framed black and white photograph of Shinwa's original plant. Ms. Ellison, he said. Mr. Sato. I understand Meridian has corrected your role. Partially. He smiled slightly. Very slightly. Good answer. I explained the terms. Executive authority. Direct reporting. Contract governance. Internal accountability. Priya's promotion. No executive override. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, and Mr. Cross? He has no authority over Shinwa communications. Mr. Sato nodded once. That is necessary. Yes. Then he said, we will recognize you again as partnership authority under section 14.3, pending written confirmation. Thank you. No, he said. Thank you for requiring them to understand the value of what they removed. That stayed with me. Not because it was flattering, because it was accurate. My first morning back at Meridian felt quieter than I expected. The parking lot was damp from overnight rain. The building's glass entrance reflected a gray Ohio sky. The lobby smelled like floor wax and coffee from the little cafe kiosk near reception. Same place, different physics. I arrived at 7:40 a.m. Not early enough to look eager. Not late enough to look uncertain. Priya was waiting near the security desk. She wore a charcoal blazer and the expression of someone who had been promoted, but had not yet forgiven anyone. "Vice President Menon," I said. She looked at me. "Don't make it weird." "I would never." "You absolutely would." "Fair." Oliver appeared behind her holding a coffee and looking like a man who had aged 6 months in 4 weeks. "Mara," he said. "Oliver. I'm glad you're back." He meant it. "That matters." "I know," I said. He nodded. "I should have pushed harder." "Yes." He took that without flinching. "Good. Won't happen again," he said. "See that it doesn't." We walked upstairs together. The office floor changed as I entered. Not dramatically. People are not movie extras. But heads lifted. Conversations paused. Someone in planning exhaled audibly. Helena stepped out of her office and gave me one firm nod from across the floor. Relief has a sound. It is quieter than applause. Much more useful. Dylan stood near the glass conference room with a laptop under one arm. He wore the same navy suit style as always, but the confidence had thinned around the edges. His hair was still perfect. Some men maintain the roof long after the foundation shifts. He looked at me. "Mara." "Dylan." That was all. No speech. No lesson. No victory lap. He moved aside so I could enter the conference room. That was enough. At 8 a.m., the recovery meeting began. Grant sat to my left. Helena to my right. Priya beside me with the master agreement open and tabbed. Oliver across the table with a notebook and the careful stillness of a man determined not to say something expensive. Dylan sat 3 seats down. Not at the center. That mattered too. I opened the binder. "We have 4 priorities," I said. Shinwa recognition confirmation, Baxter Klein audit response, November shipment release, and Q1 allocation restoration. Nobody interrupted. Refreshing. "Priya, you'll send the recognition packet to Shinwa Legal within 30 minutes. "Already drafted," she said. Of course it was. "Oliver, you'll prepare revised Q1 customer language. No promises beyond confirmed allocation. No optimism adjectives." He wrote that down. No optimism adjectives. Correct. Grant glanced at Dylan, then back at me. "Dylan," I said. He stiffened. "You'll provide the board-directed transition decision timeline to Priya by 3 p.m. for inclusion in the internal report." His face tightened. "I can have my team compile." "No," I said. "You will provide it." Silence. Then Grant said, "Dylan, do it." That was the shift. Not loud. Just final. Dylan looked at Grant. Then at Helena. Then at me. "Fine," he said. Progress often arrives wearing resentment. "I'll take it." The first 72 hours were surgical. Priya sent the recognition packet. Shinwa confirmed within 6 hours. The portal unlocked for me, and I reviewed the renewal workspace without touching anything unnecessary. There were 47 unread items. 47. I sorted them by urgency. End-use certification first. Shipment hold second. Capacity allocation third. Renewal agenda fourth. Oliver watched me work for 20 minutes before saying, quietly, "How did you keep all of this in your head?" "I didn't," I said. "I built systems around it." He looked at the screen. "Then why couldn't anyone else use them?" "Because Dylan fired the interpreter and kept the dictionary." He did not laugh. Good. It was not a joke. By Friday, Shinwa released the November shipment hold. By the following Tuesday, Baxter Klein accepted Meridian's corrective action plan, though not without adding quarterly continuity audits for the next year. Fair. If a supplier lights itself on fire in front of you, you're allowed to check for matches later. The annual renewal meeting was rescheduled for October 28th. In person. Nagoya. Dylan did not attend. That was one of Shinwa's conditions. Meridian accepted. Of course they did. The flight to Japan felt different this time. For 11 years, I had flown there as the person maintaining trust in the background while executives took credit for stable outcomes. This time, my authority was written clearly enough that even Meridian could understand it. Priya flew with me. So did Oliver. He spent 4 hours on the plane reading the renewal binder. Actually reading it. I respected that. At the hotel in Nagoya, Priya and I sat in the lobby with tea while rain moved softly against the windows. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. Do you regret coming back? No. Really? I don't regret terms. She considered that, then nodded. Good distinction. The renewal meeting lasted 6 hours. Not 2. 6. Because serious agreements require time, translation, silence, repetition, and respect for the fact that nobody enjoys discovering hidden assumptions after signatures dry. Mr. Sato opened the meeting in Japanese. I responded in Japanese. Not perfectly. Enough. His expression softened when I used the older formal phrasing he preferred. Small thing. Not small. Oliver noticed. Good. Shinwa agreed to renew for 3 years, but not under the old terms. Meridian lost its preferential price band for year 1. That cost $2.4 million. Shinwa reduced flexible search capacity by 15% until Meridian completed 2 clean audit cycles. That cost more in lost upside than finance wanted to admit. And the renewal included a new governance addendum requiring annual executive certification that no recognized partnership authority could be removed without 120 days notice and successor approval. My language. Sharper this time. Meridian signed. Mr. Sato signed. I signed as witness and executive authority. Afterward, Oliver stood beside me in the hallway while the Shinwa team moved into a private conference room. He looked tired, but not defeated. I understand now, he said. I looked at him. What part? He glanced toward the closed door. That they weren't buying parts from us. They were trusting us not to make them regret helping us build our business. That was close enough. Hold on to that, I said. 6 months later, Meridian was stable again. Not untouched. Stable. Important distinction. My title was Executive Vice President of Global Partnerships and Supplier Continuity. The words barely fit on a business card, which was fine because I had never trusted business cards to do serious work. Priya ran contract governance with the precision of a federal clock. She built a new partner authority registry that tracked every critical external relationship, named responsible executives, required successor plans, language capability, renewal dates, risk levels, and clause dependencies. No more invisible load-bearing relationships. If the company depended on trust, the trust had an owner, a backup, and a documented transition path. Oliver became Senior Vice President of Commercial Accounts and, to his credit, changed. Not spiritually. This was manufacturing, not a retreat center. But practically. He stopped treating relationships as sales accessories. He brought partnership managers into customer calls early. He asked before promising. He learned to say, I don't know yet, which is one of the most profitable sentences in business when used correctly. Helena took over operational oversight of international supplier risk. She and I built a quarterly continuity review that required finance, legal, operations, engineering, and sales to sit in the same room and explain their assumptions out loud. Painful. Effective. Assumptions hate daylight. Dylan remained at Meridian. That surprises some people. They expect the villain to be escorted out with a cardboard box and a security badge dangling from one finger. Real companies are stranger than that. Dylan was stripped of authority over strategic supplier relationships, technical partner communications, and contract renewal governance. He kept a reduced integration role managing internal reporting for the Indianapolis acquisition under Helena's oversight. A short leash. Very visible. He still wore navy suits. Still had perfect hair. Still said alignment too often. But he no longer entered Shinwa meetings. He no longer touched partner renewal strategy. And when Priya asked him for documents, he sent them. On time. That, in corporate terms, is character development. The internal report circulated 8 weeks after my return. 31 pages. Plain language. Timeline. Decision points. Clause history. Risk warnings. Specific names. Specific failures. It documented that Meridian had removed the mutually recognized partnership authority without successor approval, failed to review Section 14.3 before restructuring, mishandled partner communication, and exposed $22 million in annual contract value plus $38 million in downstream customer revenue. Dylan's name appeared 14 times. Mine appeared 9. Priya's appeared 6, mostly attached to warnings that had been ignored. The report did not shout. It did not need to. Facts are more durable when they do not perform. The total financial damage came to $9.7 million. That included premium pricing, Baxter Klein audit penalties, expedited logistics, outside consultants, legal fees, lost Q1 purchase orders, and the 15% reduction in Shinwa surge capacity. $9.7 million because someone decided a relationship built over 11 years could be socialized after lunch. The irony was that my new compensation package cost Meridian less than 6% of the damage. I did not mention that in meetings. Finance discovered it on their own. Always better that way. My life changed too. Not dramatically. Better. I stopped apologizing for blocking time on my calendar. I stopped taking calls at 10 p.m. unless there was an actual production emergency, not an executive emotion wearing a deadline costume. I restarted Japanese lessons, not because I had to, but because I wanted to speak with more precision. There is a difference between language as survival and language as pleasure. On Saturday mornings, I began walking along the lake before grocery shopping. Cold air. Gray water. Coffee in a paper cup. No laptop in my bag. The first time I did it, my sister texted, "Are you working?" I sent her a photo of the lake. She replied, "Who are you and what have you done with Mara?" Fair question. 3 months after the renewal, Shinwa sent a delegation to Cleveland for the first quarterly governance review. Mr. Sato came personally. That was not necessary. That was the point. We held the meeting in the same conference room where Dylan had once said they would have to get used to our new structure. Same new carpet smell, though less glue by then. Same screen. Same long table. This time, the renewal binder was open. In front of everyone. Mr. Sato greeted Priya by title. He asked Oliver about his daughter's college applications, because Oliver had mentioned it once in Nagoya and Mr. Sato remembered. Then he turned to me. "Mara-san," he said, "the structure is better now." I nodded. It needed to be. He looked around the room. "Yes," he said. "Now it respects what was already true." That sentence landed quietly. The best ones usually do. Later that week, I received a LinkedIn notification. Dylan Cross had viewed my profile. I stared at it for a moment. Then laughed once. Not loudly. Just enough. A month after that, an industry publication ran a short article about Meridian's new global supplier continuity model. It quoted Grant twice, Helena once, and me once. My quote was boring. Deliberately. Critical partnerships require documented authority, cultural competence, and succession planning. Not exactly poetry, but accurate. At the bottom of the article, in the comments, someone from Baxter Klein wrote, "This should be standard practice." Yes, it should. Funny how often standard practice starts as the thing one woman was doing quietly until someone important made the mistake of stopping her. Sometimes I still think about that morning in conference room C. The lemon cleaner smell. The clicking air vent. Dylan sliding a severance folder toward me like paperwork could erase 11 years of trust. I remember him saying, "We'll be fine." And honestly, he was almost right. They were fine eventually. After the contract froze, the shipments paused, the client auditors arrived, the stock dropped, the board intervened, the report named names, and the company paid $9.7 million to relearn the difference between a supplier and a partner. Fine is a flexible word. So is redundant. That was the part they never understood. I was not powerful because I spoke Japanese. I was powerful because Shinwa believed I listened in any language. The language mattered. The clause mattered. The documents mattered. But the real asset was trust built so consistently that when Meridian removed me, the absence had legal, financial, and human weight. They thought the relationship belonged to the company. What they didn't know is that companies do not own trust just because they own the letterhead. If you've ever been underestimated at work, I hope this story reminds you that quiet preparation always beats loud arrogance. If this resonated, like and subscribe. I share stories like this every week. And tell me in the comments if you've ever watched a company cut the one person holding everything together. Because sometimes the most expensive sentence in business is not hidden in a contract. It is the quiet one someone says while walking out the door. Good luck with that.